My name is Jakob Gottlieb Svendsen, and I am. I could just go to the next step here. I'm what's called the chief developer, a consultant, trainer, speaker, some guy who does some stuff at a company called Cortec. First thing I want to say is that just to place service management automation, where does it place it together with Windows Azure Pack and System Center? How many of you know about Windows Azure Pack? All right, it's not that well known yet, but what it actually is that we have the Windows Azure package. You could call it the front end for System Center, a website, a portal where you can have a lot of help in a lot of easy GUI. You can manage your virtual machines. You can manage a lot of stuff in here. But actually, Windows Azure Pack is not in Azure. It's run on premise, so it's kind of like running your own Azure in your own data center. To run this stuff, so for instance, if you create a virtual machine, it will be Virtual Machine Manager who creates, go in and does all these jobs. Same thing about if you need monitoring, you still use Operations Manager. And if you want to do automation, then it's still Orchestrator that you would need to run your automation. So even though this is a part of the portal in Windows Azure Pack, the actual processing, the actual actions is actually done by Orchestrator in System Center. Windows Azure Pack does not have any licensing, but of course System Center does. Some of the functionality you get in Windows Azure Pack, like managing websites or SQL databases, it does not need anything except Windows Azure Pack, but a lot of the other stuff does. So when you open the portal, the administration portal for Windows Azure Pack, you'll see these the different tabs, and one of them are called automation, and that is the stuff I'm going to talk about today. First of all, how many of you were at the session just before me here with Alexander? All right. Actually, I should change a little bit in some of my demos after I watched his session, but that's how it goes, you know. So it might not be perfect practice when Master Alexander just has said something else. Anyway, what it actually does, the automation part in Windows Azure Pack, is it adds a support for running PowerShell in a very centralized and very high available, scalable manner. It runs a thing called PowerShell workflows, and if you are to write these runbooks, you should look into these differences in the workflow. I'll go into some of them here, of course, but not a lot of them. You could, for instance, get, if you didn't see Alexander's session, you could get his slides afterwards. There's a lot of good information. We can actually create these runbooks in the portal itself. And the great thing is that just like the classic Orchestrator, it supports scale and high availability. So this means we can have up to, I don't know how many, 1,000 machines running this PowerShell code if we want to. And the good thing about this new SMA compared to the classic Orchestrator is that it actually does it in a load balanced way. So this means if you have two servers that are supposed to run this PowerShell code, then they will each get 50% of the jobs. Since it's based on PowerShell, we can import any kind of PowerShell module, which makes it very flexible. In the end of my demo here, I want to, actually I can show it to you right now. I want to automate this one, which is kind of a little trick I do at the end of my sessions, just to show that we can actually automate almost anything. And if you want to read more about the introduction, there is a good website called the Building Clouds blog, which is the team behind Windows Azure Pack and the service management automation. And in here, there's also a blog that has an introduction, which goes through much of what I'm going to say today. Let's go into the Windows Azure Pack first. And as I said, when you open the Windows Azure Pack, you have all these different tabs here. And the one I want to show is the automation tab. But again, this is just a GUI. It's just a portal to administer your runbooks. Actually, you don't actually need this portal to actually run your runbooks. If you wanted to create your own, you could do that. So in here we can see, for instance, how many runbooks has been run for the last 30 days, for instance. Well, I haven't run so many on this exact demo environment. This is the one running on my laptop. So in here I can actually see which of the different runbooks that has run. If I go into runbooks, I can see all my runbooks. They are not sorted in folders, but I can make these tags on them out here. So I can, for instance, take all the ones that I have for demos, or all the ones that are called something with the robot. And I actually see that I should delete this one because I want to import it later. So I can actually administer all my runbooks in here, all my PowerShell workflows, which they actually are. So this is a very nice place to actually have a good overview of which runbooks you have. I mean, probably many of you have scheduled tasks running around on different computers. And when I ask my customers, I usually ask, okay, do you run PowerShell? Yes. Scheduled PowerShell? Yes. They are running on scheduled tasks on computers and say yes, and they work? Yes. But which computers are they running on? I don't know. They don't actually know because some of them are running on one server, some on another server, some on a third server, depending on which type of script it was and which, for instance, the web servers might run some. Or, yeah. So instead of not knowing where different stuff is, it's much nicer to have everything in one place. And of course, it's much more secure because, as you'll see in the architecture, this is based on a database. All right. So if I want to create a new runbook, I'll just click New and Runbook, quick Create, and then we say New NIC website. Demo. Oh, and I can write these tags. NIC. Oops, that was the wrong field. Down here. So I create the runbook, and we'll just go in and find it here by searching for NIC. When I go into the runbook itself, I can again see different stats for this exact runbook. Of course, there's nothing right now. I can see which jobs has run for the runbook. I can configure different things, like if I want to see progress and verbose records. I'll get back to that later. I can also set schedules on the runbook to say, okay, this runbook should run every day, should run every second day, anything like that. And in the author tab, I can actually edit and create my runbook. So I have two versions of my runbook. There's the published version and a draft version. Published version is the one that will be run if somebody or some other runbook tries to run this runbook. So this is the published and tested version. But if I want to create change it a bit, I can change it in the draft version. In the draft version, I'm able to actually write the runbook. For instance, I can write some parameters, just like if I had a normal PowerShell script. When when I want to test this, I can then click the test button here, and it will actually run the runbook just as if it was running in production, but it'll not overwrite the published version. We'll still have that version, and when we know our draft version works, we can then go in and publish this version, and it will replace the other one. So we actually have two versions we can use. Yep. So in this case, what I want to do as a demo is something very simple. I want to create a website. I want to copy some files to the website, and that's about it. But what I want to be able to do is, first of all, to define where should the website run, where should the website be created, on which machine, and this is where Alexander actually had a little bit of a nicer way to do this. The next up is I want to describe where to get the files from for the website, then a name for the website, and then which port the website should run as, on, of course. And this is a standard parameter block, just as in any PowerShell. So what I can do is, of course, in this website port, I want to set a default value. So I just do a equal sign and then port number 80 as default. Of course, I could do much more. If you look at the stuff I have right here is I can set stuff like if it's supposed to be mandatory, if it's supposed to be a string or a number, or if it is supposed to, yeah, there is a few other options too. So we'll just grab this instead. All right. Next up, I want to insert a command to actually create the folder itself. And I want to do that pretty simple, just to show you that you can still use the old aliases, just such as mkdir for creating a folder, just as you would in years ago in command prompt. So I say make dir, and then I explain where to put the folder that should be on the computer that we typed in the computer name, on the C drive, in the Internet Information Services folder, and then the folder should be called the same as the website. So when I have this, I can actually click test. It will save my runbook. And now when I run a runbook in Service Management Automation, I will actually be asked for these inputs, as you can see. So I could, for instance, run, okay, you should do this on the domain controller, which is not best practice. You should get this from the computer called SEO demo. Let's just see if I'm correct. Sorry, I think it's on the web server demo. Here we go. Here I have the website. Let's just open it. Very simple website, as you can see. System Center Orchestrator is just a title. So, and it's placed right there. So what I do here is to actually put in where it's located. I give the website a name. We can call it NIC 2015 number 1, or we can just call it NIC number 1. And here, of course, I could write some port 80, but I could also leave it out because this was set to a default value called 80. Right? So when I trigger this, it'll actually create a job. Well, now it's in testing mode, so we won't be able to see the job in the job list, but because that's just the real jobs. But here it actually starts a job and writes in the database, now this runbook should be run. And then a server, one of my runbook workers, will pick it up and it will start the runbook, it will run the runbook, and it will complete, as you can see here. So if we go to the folder, we can check that it's created. Here you go. See, I've done this a few times before. And here you see we have created the folder. So that's the first step. Let's just continue on to see other stuff. So the portal, the good thing is that we have one centralized place to have put our runbooks, to put all our PowerShell, is that we can actually either start from the website, we can start it from PowerShell, we can start it from command line via PowerShell, we can start it from our own website. Actually, if you have enterprise scheduling tools that supports triggering actions on web services, then you can start it from there too. So it's very simple to actually start these runbooks from different locations in your environment. You will, for instance, see if you join my session later today at 4 o'clock that I start a runbook directly from a SCOM alert. So it will automatically fix itself using a runbook. Another very cool thing about this, having a centralized store, is that we can save stuff like the modules that we use, so that any runbook that runs on each of these servers will have the same modules available. We can also save what's called variables, and that means, for instance, if we want to save the address of our SMTP server, or we want to save some kind of setting for our runbook, we can use this variable for that. We can also use the variables to save stuff from our runbook. That could be, when was this runbook last run, if we need to use that the next time we run the runbook, or any kind of values. And a very powerful functionality is that you can actually save credentials too. So this means we can actually save a username and password, and the password, if you save it as a credential object, or credential asset as it's called here, we can actually save the password without anybody being able to read the password again. So In that way, it's a very nice way to be able to save service account information and then reuse that in the runbooks. Also certificates, and in the end we can also put what's called connections, but that is really just a combination of, for instance, a connection to Service Manager. That would be a computer name as a variable, and then a credential for connecting to the computer. We can actually define these types of connections ourselves when we create modules that can be used in here. And then, as I said, we can test it when it's completed, and then we can actually publish it when we know it's working. Yep. So these assets, as I talked about, I can manage them from in here too. So runbooks, and then we have assets here. And in here I have all these different kinds of assets like connections, credential, modules. So I can actually, for instance, go down here and say add setting, credential, and then I can select, yes, this should be a PowerShell credential called, let's call it SCSM admin, SVC or something like that. We could also use spaces if we want to. We can write a description. And in here we can then write some kind of credential. And as you can see, the password is hidden here, and it's saved as a secure string, so therefore we cannot read it again in this specific type of asset. There we go. Now it's created, and this means I can, inside my runbook, actually use this credential in any way I want. So for instance, if I go back to my runbook, this one. Right now, for this demo, I actually don't need it, but I'll try to insert it anyway. So if you look down here, I have different buttons like test, publish, and so on. But I also have this one called insert. And in here, I can insert an activity. I can insert a runbook. I can insert a setting. So if I click the setting here, I can actually select my credential that I just created. You see this one. And insert it. So this means that this command, get automation PS credential, will actually go in and by the name of this credential, get the credential I need. I can then put it inside a variable like this, and then I can reuse it in each of the commands, activities that I run in this runbook. So the schedules, if we go to the schedule tab, whoops. Just go back here. Yep, and as it says, you must first publish the runbook before you can add a schedule. So what I just want to do is to publish it, and it will now be saved, closed in the draft version, and then it will be available here, but you can see I cannot change it when it's published. Go to schedule, and can then add a new schedule. I'll just call it demo. And in here I can set stuff like if it's daily, for instance, and if it's every day, or every second day, every third day. And as you can see, at this point of time, it's not as advanced as the one in schedule task, but I'm pretty sure that they are working on expanding it to support the same stuff like first Monday of the month and stuff like that. We can set a schedule. We can set when it's supposed to end, if we want it to run for every day for 3 months, for instance, something like that, 5 months. And we can set which values this runbook should run as when it triggers. All right. So if I go back to, there is one more thing we can do in kind of scheduling, because if we go to the VM clouds here, actually in this environment, this is my local environment here, which I use together with the robot. So I don't have a big Hyper-V host set up and so on. But what we could do here was actually to link an action to a runbook. So for instance, if a user comes into the Windows Azure pack and they administer their virtual machines from in there, then we can actually go in and say, okay, if this user go in, let me just see, virtual machine here. If the user deletes or creates a new virtual machine, then we want to run a specific runbook whenever they delete a virtual machine, and this runbook can then receive some information about which machine was deleted, and then we can actually run commands, for instance, update an external system that has information about these machines, or clean up some other stuff that doesn't happen automatically. All right. So the way, wrong button. That's better. The way this is built is almost the same as classic Orchestrator, which means we have in the middle, the central point of connection is a OData web service. The difference between classic Orchestrator and the new one is that this web service can do anything. So you can delete runbooks, you can edit runbooks, you can do any kind of action through this web service. So of course, when we use the portal, it actually uses this web service to update all this stuff. You'll see later that there is tools where we can actually not use the website, but actually go in and use another tool to update the runbooks if we want to. Behind the web service, we have a database, and of course, this is a SQL database. It can be clustered and so on. So in here, we have everything, all the runbooks, all the jobs, everything that has to do with SMA is stored in here. So therefore, the database is of course the most important point to back up and to have clustered and so on. So whenever we click start on a runbook through the web service or through the portal, it'll actually create a job in the database. This job will then be sent to one of the runbook workers. So we can have as many runbook workers as we want, which is usually a dedicated server. One for each run, can each be one runbook worker, and they can then pick up the jobs. And since this is a PowerShell workflow, the jobs is actually able to suspend themselves, which means that if they stop in the middle, for instance, they cannot. Let's say you create a user, and then you create an email address in mail server, and after you created the user, that was fine. Next step fails, it cannot create the email address because the server was down or whatever was wrong. Then the runbook will fail, of course, but it will just suspend itself and save itself back into the database. So we can actually, by using what's called checkpoints, have it resume where it failed. So when we know the server is back up and running, we can resume the jobs, and another runbook worker will actually pick up the job. Could be the same, could be another runbook worker, will pick up the job and continue and retry the failed action. I'll show you that in a second. So all these parts, as I said, is part of Orchestrator. It's just the portal that is the Windows Azure pack, which is the GUI to actually administer this. So when you want to install it, on the Orchestrator installation, there is this, since R2, there is this new section in the left corner, which has the web service, the runbook worker service, and also a very simple PowerShell module, which you can use to start and stop runbook jobs. All right. So if you have seen anything about any other sessions or read about Windows Azure Pack, it can be a huge beast. I mean, the biggest installation, recommended distributed installation, I think it's minimum 16 servers. There's also a recommendation for 32 servers. So people sometimes get afraid, like, whoa, this is a big product. We don't want 16 servers just to be able to run some PowerShell. But it's actually only a few parts of the Windows Azure Pack which is needed here. So as you can see, in my recommendation, absolute minimum would be one server for Orchestrator, for the web service, and for the runbook worker, and for the PowerShell module. And then another server for the actual admin portal and the web service that actually authenticates you for the admin portal. So it's just a few components of Windows Azure Pack that you would need. But as I said before, the idea is that you have multiple servers to run your PowerShell. So therefore, the Runbook worker, which we have here, should actually be on its server on itself, and you should have more than one server that is a Runbook worker. Luckily, they are pretty simple today to set up a server, install a service, and then register it for Orchestrator. So there was a few limitations, or there is a few limitations in the classic Orchestrator graphical interface. One of them was is that it's a 32-bit application, which means that if we need to do 64-bit actions like administering a Windows Exchange, a Microsoft Exchange, for instance, then we would need to do some tricks to get around that. But here in SMA, we have built-in 64-bit. Everything is 64-bit. It runs native PowerShell, which means that it supports any kind of PowerShell version that's on the machine. So if you are already running PowerShell 5 in some beta version, well, it works in here too. You can checkpoint, as I said, you can insert a checkpoint, and this means we can resume at that point again. I'm just going to demo that in a second. The architecture is much more scalable. As I said in the beginning, it has proper load balancing, which means that if you had 3 servers, they will get 33% of the job each. If you have 2, they will get 50% job each. While the classic Orchestrator, it has a primary server, and when that's filled, it will go to the next server. When that's full, it will go to the next server, and so on. So one server will be very, very busy, and the other ones will be very idle. You have 2 versions of your runbooks. As I showed, you have the draft version and the published version too. And you have built in the scheduler. Another thing you can do is actually parallel processing. Because this is PowerShell workflow, we can make it actually handle multiple results at the same time using parallel actions. But it is based on text, at least for now. I'll get back to the roadmap in the end of this session. It's based on text. So if you like writing PowerShell, if you know how to write PowerShell, it's great. I mean, a guy like me who have done it every day since 2006, I can write faster than I can draw. But for many others, it can be a very nice help to have the visual designer that you have in the classic graphical orchestrator. Yep. Let me show you the checkpoints. In here we have my runbook again. So, and again, this is my laptop running, so it's not completely sized according to best practices. But what I can do here is, the next step I want to do is actually to insert, create the website itself. So I could actually use this GUI for help if I want to, just to show how it works. I'll try. Select insert and activity, and then I can actually select between all the modules that I have. One of them is web administration, which is the one for internet information services. In here we have the new website commandlet, which I can select, and then I can see some information about what is needed for different inputs, like the website name, physical address, that's where the website is on the machine, port for the website itself. When I click complete, it will actually insert this kind of code into my runbook, and I can then edit this as I want. All these with the square brackets, that's a standard the syntax definition in PowerShell saying this is optional. So this means I don't need that one, or this one, or that one. Actually, there's a lot of these I don't need, so I just delete those, like this. So I can actually get help to fill out my command. I remove these brackets here. Here we go. And now I have my command, and now I can see this text they have here. It says, okay, here you need to replace this with a text string, and that was the website name. So I'll insert the website name here. Physical path, well, I copy it to C drive, to inetpub and website name. So the physical path would be something like this. Oops. It tries to help you a bit, but sometimes it's so it will go to it will actually create this website on the local machine and get in this folder. And then we have the website port 2. And as you can see, it actually has tab completion, so I can use tab to complete my command. But the thing is that since this is workflow, it's not always that you can use all PowerShell commands in there. I would recommend, as I said, to read about all the different blogs and the different stuff about PowerShell workflow, because some of them just doesn't work in a workflow. But as an easy fix for that, we can put them inside something called an inline script. There we go. All right. So this means this inline script, it will actually start up a PowerShell just as a normal PowerShell would when you run a script, and you can run your script in here. But that also means that this actually runs in its own scope, as it's called. It has its own process, so it actually doesn't know my variable. So even though this one is called website name, it would not find it. I need to mark it to say, okay, this is an outside variable that you should get from your parent, from the workflow. And you do that by writing using in front of it. It's the same when you do PowerShell remoting, stuff like that. Here you go, using. But a very nice feature about this inline script is that I can actually decide which computer to run this command on. As you might notice before, I told it to create a website and I told it to point onto a local folder, which means, of course, that I want to run this command on the server that needs to have the website itself. So on the inline script, I can actually add what's called PS computer name. And I can write the computer name here, like that. So this will be a PowerShell script. You could paste in any kind of PowerShell script you have, and it will run on the computer. So now we have 2 steps in our runbook. Between them, I can put in this thing called checkpoint runbook. Sorry, workflow, of course. Checkpoint workflow. And after this, also, I'll have some more stuff in just a second. Here we go. For instance, the next command would be to copy the stuff from the source to the server itself. So that would be the 3rd command. This means if it fails creating the website because it cannot connect to the computer in the computer name, then it will suspend itself and it will show as a suspended job, and it will actually start from here again when we start again. So the folder will not try to be created again. It will only try to create the website and then continue, which is a very powerful feature which can be done in classic Graphical Orchestrator, but it's kind of advanced to do in the classic Orchestrator. All right. Yes. So, before I finish my runbook and show you the last steps, I just want to talk about when you author the runbooks, because I've shown you can do it in a website. And any developer I know would say, I would never work in a website because you don't have the exact same possibility for shortcuts, for instance, on your keyboard, and there can be other limitations. Suddenly you hit a wrong button and you switch to another site, or you close your tab or something like that. Of course, this website, this designer is made to warn you if you try to close it without you haven't saved your stuff. So of course you can do it in the portal itself. But you can also, since these are normal PowerShell workflows, you can do it directly inside your normal PowerShell ISE. But as you can see in this little example, we have something called get automation variable robot IP address, and we get the IP address of the robot. This would not work on your local machine because it's not part of SMA, because that was the feature we have in there. So to help us do that, we can actually download a PowerShell module called Emulated Automation Activities, made by a guy called Joe Levy, which is a guy from the SMA team. And you can get it at the TechNet gallery. This is a module that you set up on your local machine, and whenever you run one of these commands here, it will actually go in, if you run get automation variable, it will go to your SMA and actually get the value back to you. The last thing you can do is there's a Swedish free tool called SMA Studio that you can download. And this SMA Studio can actually replace the Windows Azure pack completely. You can do anything in here like importing your runbooks, publishing your runbooks. To check your runbooks and all that stuff, or create variables, all this stuff, you can actually do anything in this free tool, which you can download from this securebit.se. And another cool thing, it's open source, so there's actually the source code there. So if you need to do your own, or have some developers that needs to do something that connects to SMA, to do anything in SMA, well, you can actually find some nice stuff in there. Microsoft had also released some tools for SMA. First one is what's called the SMA Toolkit, and it contains 3 different things. We have, first of all, what's called the visualization and dependency mapping tool. And as you can see, this is 4 runbooks called new demo website, new demo FTP site, and so on. All of these runbooks each use another runbook called new robot notification, which is the one that actually triggers the robot. So this is what you will get. You will have a lot of these runbooks. They will use each other in different ways. And what can be tricky sometimes is to get an overview of that. So using Visual Studio and this tool, you can actually get a complete overview of any runbooks that are dependent on each other and when they use it. As you can see on line 34 in this runbook, this runbook is called, so you can actually get a complete overview. Either for one runbook, for instance, I just did it for one robot notification here, or you can do it for all your runbooks at the same time and get a huge overview of them. Another thing is you can use an import-export tool, which means you can easily export all your runbooks into a folder, or you can easily import all your runbooks from a folder into SMA. So instead of having to import it and then go in and publish it and stuff, as you will see me do later in this session, you can actually use this tool to directly import a complete folder into Orchestrator. The last one is actually for the classic Orchestrator. It's a documentation and conversion helper tool. So it's the first version or first idea from Microsoft to help you convert your already made runbooks in Orchestrator into PowerShell workflows. It can also be used to create a documentation, a Word file, and a visual diagram of your runbooks in Orchestrator so that you can easily document, or you can easily give this documentation to somebody who needs to write the runbooks. Of course, a classic Orchestrator, the graphical interface, still has a lot of useful tasks, but some organizations want to completely switch to SMA. For instance, a friend I have, they had a lot of runbooks in Orchestrator, and they actually hired a PowerShell guy. He was not an Orchestrator guy or SMA guy. He was just good at PowerShell, and he sat there for 3 months and he rewrote, I think it was 500 runbooks or something like that. Because when the hard thing about doing automation is usually to get the right logic into your runbook. I mean, the right process, then the right logic. But when you already have a pre-made runbook, it's not that hard to rewrite it in another language, if you actually know that language, of course. But there is this helper tool that can help you convert it into a PowerShell script, and then you can write from there. And again, yeah, I'll put these slides on my blog and post it on Twitter also, so that you can download and get these links if you want to. All right. So logging and progress. The last thing I want to put into my runbook is the actual logging and progress. And again, I will save a little bit time by copy pasting, just like some kind of TV show here. So each time I do something, I could, for instance, write progress, creating folder. Great. If I want some more information, I could also write debug messages. Debug messages means messages that is not always shown, but is used for debugging. And I'll show you that afterwards. Target folder, and I'll insert the same here, so that I could actually write out stuff that could help me troubleshoot, like which folder does it actually try to create. Again, we will do a progress down here, and we say creating website on computer name. In here, we just say copy content. Again, down there, I might want to add the actual where we copy from. Source folder, like that. Whoops. .target folder, and that's the same as before. Great. All right. So these messages I have, since I write them using write progress or write debug, I actually have the option to show them, either show them or not show them using the GUI here. So let me publish this one first. Here you go. So if I go in now to my job here, dashboard, I could start the Runbook. If I start this Runbook using the basic settings, all these messages that I made would not be shown. So let's just try DC, and then it's web demo, and this would be NIC number 2, and the website port doesn't matter. Now I create an actual job because I published it and I selected start the Runbook. It creates a job, as you can see, starting Runbook. I can go in and view job. I can also see it in here. You can see there's a job starting. So there is a job that I can actually go in and check the status of. And as you can see here, it's starting, still starting, and it will actually run the Runbook. Anything that the commands will output to a standard output in PowerShell will be shown down here, such as created the website. We could try. See if it works. There we go. Whoops, not completely. Must have done something wrong. Anyway, I'll fix that in a second, because we created the website here. It also created the website there, but the problem might be that there was already a website running on this port, which I didn't check for in this simple Runbook. Anyway, in here, in history, we can see, for instance, any error, which there actually was an error. We can go in and check, okay, great, there was an error, and I should fix that, of course. You see, the actual thing is that when you in PowerShell try to split a command to multiple lines, you use this little weird tag in here, and I accidentally deleted it here. So this was actually a command by itself, -port, which of course failed. So I'll just put this little tag. Usually I would recommend not to use this, split them up too much, just write them on one line instead, so you don't end up having these problems. All right, but as the commands, if we go back to my job, the status messages that I wrote, they wasn't here because they're not enabled. So the Runbook can run every day, work fine, and suddenly you have a problem. So you go back to the Runbook here to configure, and then you actually can enable these records. So both the debug records or the progress records, or actually also what's called the verbose records, if I was using write verbose. Here we go. If I now run it again, you would see that it would work. Oh, first of all, I need to, sorry. You can also select your websites out here. So the new one will be down in the bottom. Here we go. I can start the Runbook here. DC, source UNC, there will be demo, website name, NIC number 3, and let's try another port just to be sure that it working, 2015, for instance. Go. And now it starts the runbook again, runs it in the same way, but I will be able, it will actually save these messages, debug messages and progress messages into the database, so we later can go back and check that it had, what was the problem. Of course, it just needs to start, and then it will run. Yep. All right. Let's see. If we go back here, there was again a problem. I wrote something wrong in my in my source, I think. Anyway, in here you can see all the progress records. We can see the debug records in here, and so on. For some reason, it didn't want to copy that one file, which was kind of weird. Okay, for some reason it asked me to if I wanted to override it or not. So what we'll just do before the last demo is to force it, because if it's already there, for instance, then it will put it there anyway. All right. So as I promised, we should talk a little bit about the roadmap, or the vNext, and this is public stuff from, so I'm not giving out any secrets. Today we have Orchestrator for data center, we could call it. That's the graphical version. It has access permissions, so that you can set who can access which runbooks, who can edit which runbooks, and so on. It has a very nice graphical interface, which is very great for process automation. Can be a little tricky if you get to much more advanced scenarios, but it makes it very easy to visualize to other people what actually happens. I mean, sometimes it can be hard to explain what happens in a 500 lines of code. But the SMA, it has the PowerShell authoring, which has all the power of PowerShell, of course, all the modules, all that stuff. But it doesn't have the role access based permissions before yet, at least. What will happen is that it gets a new portal, just like the Azure portal. You can already go into what's called the Azure automation, which is the public Azure version of SMA. And you can see how this looks. At least some of the portal in Azure is already on the new portal. This means we can actually begin to set access permissions, like who can access which runbooks. There will also be a graphical interface for SMA. There will still be text-based runbooks too, but there will also be an option to create runbooks in a graphical interface. And this is just a mock-up that they showed on TechEd Europe. So I'm not sure it's going to look like this, but it will have something similar as the one we have today in the classic Orchestrator. It'll also have a little bit better view of the history, a little bit easier to find the runbooks. The interface will be a little bit more detailed than it is today. The thing is that what they really want to achieve is that the runbooks that you create in SMA on-premise in your own data center should also be able to run in Azure in the cloud. So the idea is that all the functionality that you will see in Azure automation will also be brought back down to SMA. So the idea is, as I said, in the end, you will have the exact same runbooks doing the same tasks, which would mean you will easily be able to automate anything either on-premise or in the cloud. There will be a gallery. There is already a gallery in Azure Automation where you can actually find your runbooks. There's some runbooks from Microsoft and some runbooks from your from community too. So you will easily be able to see if they are community or Microsoft provided runbooks. So in the next version, you will only have one solution. You will have a service management automation, and it will replace the old graphical interface. they will of course provide us with some tools, some better tools than we have today to convert the graphical stuff into PowerShell or into SMA, graphical runbooks, or whatever it ends up. I'm not sure how that's going to work, but one of the it depends on how they will make it, of course. If we will end up with a text-based or a graphical version, I'm not sure. But there will be a migration tool, so you can migrate whatever stuff you made in Orchestrator, or at least help it migrate to your SMA. Today we also have a connector for Service Manager, which is, 90% of the Orchestrator work I've done over the last few years has been together with Service Manager. So they will always also provide a connector for your SMA, so you can run your SMA runbooks from your Service Manager. You can actually do that today, but you would need to buy a third-party product like Cyberson's SMA connector, or Grid Pro. The Swedish company Grid Pro has also released a very nice Service Manager connector. Yes. Yep. So the last demo was this one called Automate Anything. And that's the little trick with the robot, just to show that a guy like me or any developer you have can make a pretty complex task, and you can actually reuse it really easily inside your runbook. So if I go to my SMA here, I actually have pre-made a little robot demo. Just need to find the right one. Whoops. All right. I actually lost it. It must be here. Yes. I actually have two versions. One that's for the table and one for the floor. but because it's not good to have it go over the table. Actually, first time this actually happened when it was not that hard to do, because I just downloaded some library from Codeplex, which I could use in a few minutes. But first time it actually triggered, it just went straight out the table and smashed on the floor and was in 1,000 pieces again. That was pretty stupid. So what I need to do first is, just a second, I'm missing this one. This is actually not a special robot or anything, it's just the starter kit from Lego Mindstorms, and I have this Wi-Fi adapter that I plug in here. There we go. I turn on the Wi-Fi, and I brought my own Wi-Fi to be sure that it works. In here, actually on my website, on the blog, I can have a detailed explanation about how this works. But if I open it here, you'll see that I have some of these variables. For instance, which IP address does the robot have? I also have something called the robot server, which is my laptop. I just need to log on to the Wi-Fi. And then I have some credentials to log on to my laptop to actually run the robot. So by using the IP address of the robot, I can actually connect to it and send commands and make it run. So I created this workflow, which is kind of advanced. As you can see, there's a lot of commands. But it only has one parameter called direction. Which way should the robot turn? Actually, I wanted to have a Norwegian flag, or a Danish and Norwegian flag. Maybe if I had the Danish flag, it could be the start of the Danish invasion of Norway. But I forgot to buy one or bring it. So that joke kind of fell to the ground. Anyway, what I can do if I have a pre-made runbook or pre-made workflow, you can, of course, there's going to be some that you can buy. There's going to be some from the gallery and all that stuff. I can import it here. So we go to the import and the new robot notification. So one thing I have to do before it works is I have to publish it. As I said before, if you are using the import tool, you can automatically publish them when you import it. But here we have my runbook, and I just click publish. Here we go. And hopefully this has found the network. Yep. Just a second. Oh no. That was not a good sound, as you can hear. Maybe too many Wi-Fis. Just a second. Sometimes if there's a lot of Wi-Fi's, the robot is not so happy about that. Come on. See you. Oh well. Actually, I've done this demo a lot of times, but last time I tried it failed for the first time, and now it doesn't want to log on to the network. So it will be an actually pretty bad demonstration, unfortunately. What I wanted to show is that in my website, in here, in my version, I can then take the runbook that I was using, and I can add it to the end down here by clicking Insert, Runbook, and then finding the runbook here, new robot notification. And as I said, it only has one parameter. So I'll go in and just fill out this and go left. But unfortunately, some kind of problem about the Wi-Fi here. Have it right here. Worked just a second ago before I came. But I think. Nope. Sorry, I don't want to waste your time. That was a little weak. I'll retry it later, I think, on my on the other one. But as you can see, even though if the Wi-Fi had worked, then I had been able to make the robot run just by this simple command, by executing another runbook made by somebody else or myself very easily in here. Yep. The last thing I want to talk about is the other stuff. If you want to see more about SMA, then you have in this room, you have at the next session, I think it is, you have David O'Brien and Trond showing stuff about real life experience and troubleshooting. Then you have Travis from Svendsen coming and showing stuff about how to integrate to Team Foundation Server and Service Manager. And then myself again at 4 o'clock, I'll show you some examples about automating System Center, where I try to use more than one component of System Center to do some kind of task. And on Friday, as you can see, hangovers. I mean, the thing is, there is no exact SMA sessions on Friday. There is some that include some PowerShell workflows. And also, if you are into Service Manager, as I am, then Travis has this thing called SCSM in the cloud, one of the first sessions. But otherwise, you can just you can see my blog on this page. There's the Building Clouds blog, and also a TechNet, a wiki, of course, tips and tricks on TechNet that you can use for when you start creating these runbooks. But otherwise, I just want to say thanks and sorry for the robot not working. I must be out of luck somehow.